Hi everyone, so today we're going to talk about Ikenga and the power figure. Remember that your homework that was supposed to be done by today is the Lukasa, and I'll check that tomorrow. And then you have a new one, which is the reliquary figure, and that is already posted on Google Classroom. To make this easier for you as we go through, I made a list of terms on the board that I'm going to use so that you know how to spell them as you go through this. And after, you're going to do a little activity about the power figure. And so you can use those terms that are on the board. This will also be posted on Google Classroom, so if you miss anything and you need to go look at it to do the activity, you can log on to Google Classroom. So this is called the Igbo Ikenga figure. Igbo is the name of the group of people, and they're located in Nigeria. And Ikenga is a type of statue that we see here. This is from the 19th century. The medium is wood. So go ahead and pause the video and make your heading, and then take a few minutes and talk with a neighbor and describe the form. So remember, think about line, shape, space, color, and texture. And then after a minute or so, you can restart it. So the Ikenga comes from Nigeria, and it's really, in a lot of ways, all about power and the individual's ability to have success or to have failure. So the Igbo believe that your success in anything, in material wealth, society, spirituality, politics, anything, is built on your determination or will to succeed, as well as your physical strength. And so they believe that part of this is tied into the Ikenga, which I'll talk about. So this is a sculpture that's primarily used, it'd be used like in a shrine or an altar, often in someone's home, dedicated to their personal strength and hopefully giving them strength. Along with that, it's a very male-oriented thing. So we'll talk about that, but not many of them are used by women. So men would commission an Ikenga to go in their personal altar in their home, and it would be dedicated and consecrated to their personal strength, success, and accomplishments, and sometimes also to provide protection for them. And all different types of people, warriors, farmers, traders, blacksmiths, would pray and make sacrifices to these altars. They'd especially offer gifts to the Ikenga if they had a particular success to encourage that to continue. Now, in this culture, the strength of a person, they believe, comes from the right hand, like that's the power center. They believe that strong hands and arms are really necessary for success in all different types of activities, hunting, farming, warfare, etc. And so a lot of these show something in the right hand, like a knife or a sword, that is the means that they're going to use to accomplish something. And then in the left hand, they have what has been accomplished. Now, traditionally, these depict war, where in the left hand, you can see here, he's holding a human head. Now, they still use that imagery in a lot of these sculptures, even though that's not necessarily like what people are trying to accomplish today, is killing or beheading people, but it's just symbolic for what you want to achieve. So most of the Ikenga are some kind of human-like figure with horns. Sometimes they're pretty abstract, like you can see in this one. The human form is pretty abstract. It's not fully developed. They generally are supposed to incorporate thought to incorporate a person's chi or individual soul, his ancestors, and then the power that comes from his hands, like I mentioned before. Young men usually acquire an Ikenga sometime in their adolescent or young adulthood phase. Generally, by the time they have a family or they're old enough to have a family, they would definitely have one in their home. They're also carved usually from hardwood. So that's supposed to symbolize like masculine energy and strength. So they use the hardest woods that they can find. And usually they have a special ceremony where the Ikenga is consecrated in the presence of one's lineage group. So in the consecration ceremony, food would be shared among the guests, and they would have a headman, a shaman, a diviner, pour wine on the ikenga, maybe slaughter an animal and sprinkle blood on it, to really like activate it and bring out that power. The horns on the ikenga, this one is a really good example because generally they're supposed to be associated with the horns of a ram, and this one, sometimes they look like that and sometimes they really don't, but that's the idea behind them. This is a good one because you can see the curved horns really look like a ram. And part of the idea behind that is probably that a ram fights sometimes with its horns, but also is known for restraint as well. And so like this idea of having physical strength, but also being able to control yourself and having restraint, self-restraint is something that is a valued trait. So again, just as a review, usually in the right hand, they have a knife or something that is the means to which they're going to accomplish something. In the left hand is often a head, although not in this figure, but it can be any symbol of accomplishment. And so the head or whatever is in the left hand is the achievement. It's supposed to be the result of hard-fought effort and physical strength, a lot of times bravery as well. So it shows that the person has great courage to achieve this. So the next one is the power figure, or Ninkisi Nkandi. You can go ahead and pause the video again and make your heading. Think about form and make some notes on form, and then after a couple minutes you can resume. All right, so let's talk about power figure. So remember from what we've learned about African culture so far that to communicate a lot with the spirit world, a lot of African societies relied on a specialist who's called a diviner. And so that person serves as a link between the supernatural and human world. And they use all different kinds of techniques to achieve this. They could be prayers, sacrifices, offerings, rituals, dances, all different things. And a diviner is somebody who's thought to be able to communicate with the spirit world more easily and sometimes tell the future. And so sometimes art intersects, a lot of times art intersects with the role of a diviner in an African culture. And so that's an example of what we have here. So the African term for this work, the first part is Ninkisi. Ninkisi is a word that literally means container. So this figure is a container that harnesses spirit forces or powers. And it's made by people in the Democratic Republic of Congo during the 19th and early 20th centuries. It has a lot of different uses. They might use it to try to alleviate illness, to protect people, or to bring success in life and like any kind of different endeavor. Okay, so I said Ninkisi means container, and so it contains aspects of the spirit world. This particular type that we're looking at, Ninkisi Nkande, is something that serves as an object for a diviner, but also has kind of a judicial function. So it was believed that an Ninkisi Nkande could seek out wrongdoers and actually administer punishments. The way this is made, it begins as a wooden figure without all these different things on it. And it'd be commissioned by a diviner or a chief if there was some sort of issue going on. The diviner would then prescribe different medicines or ingredients. These different medicines or ingredients that they put into the power figure are called bilongo. And they could be from plants, animals, minerals, anything. But things that were thought to have special powers. So this is a figure. At first, it's believed it's just a figure. It's just a wooden figure. When they put these different things into it, bilongo, that helps to start activate the power that they believe comes out of the object. So Ninkisi Nkande served a public function because it helped administer justice, especially after the Europeans came to Africa and removed a lot of the local African chiefs and different people from power. This is one of the tools that they used to help keep order. So for example, if two villages were warring, they might agree to end their conflict by swearing an oath of peace and then driving a nail into the Ninkisi Nkande to seal the agreement. Should either party break the oath, it was believed that the Nkisi Nkande would avenge the wronged party and issue some sort of punishment to that person. So here's a close-up. You can see the stomach and the abdomen. That's where they'd actually put things in there, like different medicines and things that had special powers. The other thing I want you to notice is that there's all different types of things like driven into the figure. Pegs, nails, different sizes, different depths. So keep that in mind, and I'm going to come back and talk about that in a minute. All right, so to activate the power of the figure, a person would drive a nail or other pointed object into the Nkande. This is supposed to like get the figure's attention or kind of like spur it into action. And this could be used in a private situation, like where someone has a personal issue and they go to a diviner to seek help with it, or public, where it's for the whole community to avenge something or there's some kind of problem going on. All right, now the word Nkande, the second part of the name, shares a root which means to hunt. And so the idea here is that the figure can hunt down the enemy and destroy them or issue a punishment. So it's like a spirit hunter. They can find the person who's offending or who has committed wrong. Another important term here is pakalala. This is the stance or the pose of the Nkande. So you see how they're kind of like their feet are shoulder width apart. It's standing at attention, like ready to go. So that stance of alertness is supposed to kind of lend the idea that the figure is ready to act on anything that it needs to. Sometimes this one doesn't, but sometimes they also are holding a weapon or something that they're going to use to avenge wrongs. Here's another example of an Nkisi or container. So in the culture in this particular part of Africa, close communication with the dead and the belief that the spirit world has a lot of power is very, very important. All exceptional human powers are believed to be the result of some kind of communication with the dead. Notable among people with such powers are agents known as Bangaga, who are believed to be able to see hidden things. They work as healers, diviners, mediators who defend the living against witchcraft and provide them with remedies for diseases and all sorts of issues. And so one of the things that is often associated with an Nkisi are cemeteries. Sometimes they take dirt or clay from cemeteries and include that in here as a way to better communicate with the spirit world. Okay, so like I said before in that close-up, in the abdomen, there's usually like a bulging area where the substances that empower the figure have been sealed in, and they'll put resin over it. Sometimes they'll put a mirror over it, which I'll talk about. And the word for belly in their language means life or soul. So that's often where they put the activating materials. They could be in the head, they could be in another part, but that's most common. And again, those materials are called bilongo. Usually they contain things like clay from cemeteries to connect with the spirit worlds, or metaphorical materials, which I'll talk about. So ingredients are especially chosen for their name and for the power that they're supposed to present. So metaphorical materials could include things such as the heads of poisonous snakes, the claws of birds, nets, all of which suggest the power to attack or capture someone or produce some kind of hurt on someone else who has done something wrong. The bilongo on the belly of this figure is sealed in with a mirror. Sometimes mirrors are put there because it's thought that'll help the figure like see any approaching enemies or witches and be able to fend off those evil things. Here's another example, and you can see this figure has its arm raised up like ready to take action, so they don't all look exactly the same in the particular stance of the person. So a little more about some of the things that they put in. The bilongo contains a number of different things. Sometimes they use seeds A seed could tell a spirit that it's supposed to replicate itself or grow bigger. Sometimes they use soil from cemeteries to enlist the support of the dead. Sometimes they might put in a claw from an animal to tell a spirit to grasp something. Sometimes they might put in stones that the figure is supposed to like stone the enemy as retribution. Now, the way that the different pegs and nails are driven in and what type also has significance. So if it's a small peg, it may reference a matter that's more minor or more settled, whereas a nail or something that's driven in very deeply would represent a more serious offense. And a lot of times prior to putting it in there, the opposing parties might lick the blade or like do something to connect it to their body before they drive it in. And that's like an oath that this situation is resolved. So 2 warring villages or 2 fighting people may do that to take an oath to kind of like bury the issue. And then if the oath is broken and one side goes back on that promise, then it's believed that the Nkisi will activate itself and will punish the party who's disobeyed the agreement. So you can see here that these are covered with that white clay that's often found in cemeteries. So that's again to have a connection to the spiritual world. So this slide is again talking about the fact that the Nkande means hunter. So they can hunt out people who are doing them wrong. A really good figure is thought to be able to solve legal problems, help married couples resolve their differences, control nature's destruction, and even protect a village from attack. Now, some of these objects are considered so powerful that they cannot be stored in an average person's home. They have to be under the close watch of a priest or diviner who knows how to control the power of the figure. So when you see a power figure like this one, where there's a lot of nails and pegs that have been driven in over time, or sometimes you'll even see holes where maybe the situation has been resolved and they pull the nail out, that just really shows you that this is a figure that was thought to have immense power, that they used it over and over to resolve all these different issues. Another key fact, as the different nails and pegs are driven in, it's thought that the wrongdoer will start to suffer intense pain. So sometimes in their culture, when someone has a headache or a strong pain in their body, it's thought that there is someone hunting their spirit, like maybe they've wronged someone else and someone has unleashed a power figure on them. And so then that person would have to visit a diviner or a shaman to fix their pain and get released from that problem. So just a little more context. When Europeans arrived in Africa, they saw these objects, and a lot of them, when they colonized Africa, were confiscated. They were considered pagan, not Christian, basically like witchcraft and sorcery. And so we don't have a lot of surviving examples from before the 19th and 20th century for that reason. But this whole idea has kind of been cemented into society. Part of that is when African slaves came over to the Americas and they started blending their religious beliefs with Christianity, and we had things like voodoo develop. Those things still exist today. So in New Orleans culture, for example, there are voodoo dolls where you stick a pin in something to like make something happen. So that idea carries over as Africans migrated to the United States. So what you're going to do now is follow the instructions on the annotated diagram of the power figure. So you're going to fill in the missing words in each of those annotations and then add some of your own annotations. For adding your own annotations, you can do anything about the figure. Some things you might want to include are what are some specific belongo that are included in the figure. You might want to focus on what are some of the possible functions of the figure or the things that it can do according to their culture. So those are just some ideas. And again, if you need to look at this PowerPoint again, go ahead and pull it up on Google Classroom.